Shut up, you guys, I'm not done talking about Ghibli. Today we are continuing our quest to watch every Ghibli movie and uncover the best and worst thing about it. How do we define thing? Mostly by vibe. How do we define vibe? As a person's emotional state or the atmosphere of a place as communicated to and felt by others, or another term for vibraphone. We're going to be breaking down 3 Ghibli movies today, as none of the ones that I watched scarred me enough to require their own video. First off, we're going to talk about The Cat Returns. This one was recommended by friend/viewer Jojo, and I am so shocked. I've never heard of it before. The vibes are essentially Wizard of Oz for crazy cat ladies, like myself. And considering that we basically run the world according to certain politicians, I'm so surprised this movie doesn't get more love. I did find out only after watching this film that it's actually a spin-off of another Ghibli movie, Whisper of the Heart, but even without having seen that, the story still makes sense. But if you're wondering why in the film most of the cats are just your standard magical cats, but one of the cats is actually not a cat, he's a figurine of a cat that got transformed into a magical cat, it's because he's from another thing. And if you're wondering why it's called The Cat Returns, it's because he's returning from somewhere. TBD, I haven't seen it yet, but he do be returning. The Cat Returns is about Haru, a high school student who saves the life of a cat who turns out to be the cat prince of the Cat Kingdom. As thanks, the representatives of the Cat Kingdom decide to kidnap her and force her to marry the cat prince. And Haru must escape with the help of Baron, the aforementioned magical cat figurine, and his friends before she herself becomes a cat/child bride. The best part of this film is that there are so many cats. I could just end the sentence there and it would be very on brand for me. There are so many different cats, and the character design really reflects a lot of uniqueness and thought for each cat. There are scenes where you have Baron, the figurine cat, Haru, who is halfway through the transformation into a cat, and then another character who's a plain old talking cat. And there was clearly a lot of thought that went into how each of these different types of cats would move and be proportioned, whereas in a lesser movie, I think they might have just gone, well, cat is cat. The Cat King in particular has such a cool design. If you ever wanted to know what Henry VIII would look like if he was a rock star and also a cat, it's this guy. And he's voiced by Tim Curry because who else would play the Cat King? Not Tim Curry? Come on. The worst thing is that the Cat Kingdom is not really explained thoroughly and in some places just doesn't make sense. Do all existing cats come from the Cat Kingdom, or are there normal cats and Cat Kingdom cats? Is Haru exceptional in being able to talk to cats, or do cats just choose not to speak to most humans? And the whole last act is Haru and her friends trying to escape the Cat Kingdom by making their way through a complex maze and a huge tower. So how does the average cat get out of the Cat Kingdom? Or does the average cat not visit the human world, and any cats we see out in the street are either some high-ranking cat official on official Cat Kingdom business, or some cat expat who has entered the human world illegally? Apparently this makes more sense in the manga on which it's based, where the Cat Kingdom is essentially cat heaven, where cats go when they die. For example, the kitten Haru feeds as a child has gotten hit by a car and is essentially helping her from beyond the grave. But that version is bad. Not from a storytelling perspective, but just for my personal emotional well-being. So I'm glad they changed it, but I would have liked for them to tighten up the logic. Other notes. Kind of weird how the whole plot is about how bonkers it is for these cats to kidnap a teenage girl to get her to marry the cat prince, only for that girl to develop a crush on a cat that is also sometimes an inanimate object. I mean, I know a lot of people will admit to having had a crush on adult Simba at some point in their life, but come on, girl. you're a little old for that. But they do handle this crush realistically, as opposed to some Ghibli movies, where anyone a child has feelings for is apparently their soulmate, Ponyo. She tells Baron she has a little crush on him, and he's just like, thank you for telling me. Goodbye. This is a cat figurine you can trust with your children. One of the good cat figurines. Next, let's talk about Princess Mononoke. I knew it was darker than most Ghibli movies, but I did not expect the main character to shoot someone's head off with a bow and arrow within the first 20 minutes. Really, that's not something I ever expect to see. It's also, in my opinion, very D&D coded. Like, an at 20 roll is really the only good explanation for someone's head coming clean off with an arrow, and that's if Daddy Miyazaki is a generous DM. This film is about a prince who goes on a quest to lift a curse and ends up trying to stop a conflict between the land's animal spirit inhabitants and an increasingly industrialized town. I think the best thing about this film is that most of the characters are very grounded and three-dimensional. I think it would be very easy for this film to take the simplistic position of environment good, human development bad, and make these characters either selfless heroes or greedy, exaggerated villains. But the characters on both sides of the story are quite complex, especially the women. For example, Lady Eboshi, who rules the Iron Town, has basically created a sanctuary and sense of purpose for outcasts, including the disabled and former sex workers. It just so happens that the existence and expansion of such a place requires deeply harming the surrounding lands and those that live off it. And for that, she gives zero shits. She's just a girl boss with a huge carbon footprint, like a Ghibli Taylor Swift. Meanwhile, Sun, the wolf princess, who at some point someone must refer to as Princess Mononoke, but honestly I do not remember that title drop, obviously has the most noble intentions in trying to save her forest and its inhabitants, but is so painfully stubborn and just a little bloodthirsty that she basically makes negotiating with the humans just never a possibility. So, the opportunistic monk who eggs the conflict on for his own gain is the closest thing we have to a standard greedy villain, but he's also really congenial and goofy, so it's hard to see him as evil. He definitely would unironically identify as just a little guy. On the flip side, the worst thing about this film is how bland the main character Ashitaka is, which pains me to say because in the D&D campaign that is this movie, his class is Ranger, and God knows Rangers need better representation. But he's just this fantastic warrior who is also noble and selfless and deals with the threat of his death stoically. He rolls into this town where this conflict has been happening for years and immediately tells the women leaders how they should solve it. Like, he's right because he's the main character, but that doesn't make it less obnoxious. This curse on his hand that he has to cure is fueled by the power of hate, and the implication is it feeds on any hate he secretly has and tries to force him to act on it. But in these moments, he's such a zen and emotionless character that it doesn't feel like it's actually his hidden violent desires bubbling up. It's just his arm is possessed. It's just kind of doing its own thing. Other notes? This film obviously has some extreme violence and other nightmarish stuff, but for me, the creepiest thing was the gorillas, especially in that first scene where they're cloaked in shadows. Very strange, very uncanny valley. But my friend Pat, who I watched the film with, was most creeped out by the little tree spirits, who I obviously thought were excellent. He said he didn't like when they gathered in large groups, but I thought the best scene in the whole thing is when they're in the trees watching the great forest spirit transform back from his Nightwalker shape, and there's a gust of wind and they all raise their little arms like they're on a roller coaster. Now for a 180 back into a more classically adorable Ghibli film, Kiki's Delivery Service. I said I was gonna get a big red bow for this and I didn't. I might have a witch's broom. It's amazing the things we have and do not have in this household. You want a Band-Aid? We're probably out of luck. You want A little statue of a frog? Sure, what specific feeling would you like him to evoke? I mean, let's be honest, this is mostly just for the thumbnail. This film is about a 13-year-old witch in a world that operates by Pokemon logic, meaning that the young children just kind of go off into the world with no plan, no supervision, no means of communication to achieve their dreams. Kiki leaves her hometown to find a new city where she can become the resident witch, discover her specialty, and hone her craft. Apparently, this is a better way to become educated in witchcraft than just by staying with your family, and because witchcraft seems to be genetic, learning from their mothers. The best part about this movie is that, unlike in Pokemon, the people of the seaside town she ends up in fully recognize how batshit this idea is. They're like, well, what do you mean you're not with your parents? What do you mean you have nowhere to stay? What do you mean you want to be our witch? Those are the ones who actually care enough to ask questions. There are also several people she tries to talk to who are just like, I do not have time to be an NPC in this story, which I think is pretty realistic. But she does meet a woman called Osono who learns of her situation and is like, guess I'm a mother now. Later on, she also meets an older woman who sees her hustling to cover her own bills with a delivery service and is like, guess I'm a grandmother now. Basically, amidst this crazy yet adorable premise, there's some realism without flat out erasing the whimsy. The worst part is that Kiki doesn't really end up studying any magic, which is the point of her journey. She just kind of goes all in on this delivery service. I guess you could say her specialty becomes flying, but she's not shown to be particularly exceptional at flying. She's just a novelty in this town as a witch with a broom. I guess in some ways it's another dose of reality that someone seeking a dream or higher education might get painfully sidetracked by their side hustle, just trying to make ends meet, but it's not implied to be a bad thing that she's running this business full time instead of making polyjuice potion or voodoo dolls or whatever. I would just love one scene where, like, she turns the rich mean girl into a toad and no one sees and it's just never brought up again. Other notes, I do think Kiki is a really good depiction of a 13-year-old girl. She really balances the childlike innocence with adolescent thirst for independence and occasional moodiness. And her age-appropriate crush is not on a cat figurine, which is great for her. I would really like someone to get this kid more than one dress. How did her parents send her off for a year with no money and one outfit? That's not even like cartoon logic where that's just the norm for everyone to wear the same thing every day. That's like she's going to a party and she's just like, I guess I'll wear this because it's the one thing I have. So that concludes what is technically the third part of my Ghibli series. If you have any Ghibli films you're dying for me to talk about, please let me know. It's very useful, especially now that I'm diving into some of the lesser known entries. Also, let me know what Ghibli creature you think is creepy that no one talks about. If it's my little tree guys, you're wrong, but let me know anyway. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a delicious day.
Kiki, do you love me? Are you riding? Say you never ever leave.
And cat is cat, you know?